All right, hello. Welcome to the next edition of my YouTube live sessions here in quarantine. I hope you guys have watched the first video. Had a few little tech issues there at the start, but it's uploaded now, so feel free to go back and watch that one. One thing I did forget to do in the last video is actually introduce myself. So my name is Tom. I'm a front of house engineer, occasional monitor engineer, occasional system engineer in Melbourne, Australia. And I suppose the reason that I'm doing these videos is to give me something to do while we've got some time off, and also hopefully share some of the things I'm doing specifically on a Digico SD11 to give some of you ideas of how to structure your sessions, some things to do. So hopefully you guys are getting something out of these videos. I'm even learning stuff by choosing what I'm going to show you and going through some old files and sessions and stuff. As far as I can see, I've got the chat working, so feel free to pop things into the chat if there's something, that you want to chat about. So I've also put my social media links below. So I've got an Instagram and a Facebook page. So feel free to like and follow those, and you'll get updates as to when I'm doing this again, and some lovely console shots and some other things that I post up there. So check them out. And I'm going to be doing these sessions at 11 a.m. every Monday. It's every Monday until I get bored and or quarantine's over and we're back doing gigs, which is hopefully really soon, but we'll see how all that goes. For today, a few weeks ago, I did an Instagram live, which was my first time streaming, doing anything like that. So thanks to everyone that tuned in to do that. And I covered some stuff that I was doing with snapshots and macros, and just generally how I was running a pretty intense session on the Digico, doing front of house, doing monitors, doing all sorts of things for a three-piece band that swaps around and that sort of thing. So what I thought, and I had a lot of people say that they wanted the recording of it, and stupidly I didn't record it. I just put it up on Instagram and then sort of forgot to save it. So what I'm choosing to do today is to basically go back through all of the stuff that I was doing on that Instagram live, and basically put it up on the internet so that people have a reference point. They go back and watch it. I had heaps of good feedback about it, about how people were going and trying some of the things that I was doing with the snapshots and the macros firing snapshots and all sorts of stuff. And even since then, I've made some updates to this show file. So I thought what I'll do first is I'll go through the console layout with you, what I'm doing, how I'm laying things out, and just show you sort of what I'm doing. So I'm just going to switch over to the above camera, and hopefully you can see the console and the Streamdeck. So that's all happening there. So it's a pretty full-on show file, this one, even though it's only at about 30, actually 28 inputs, I think, is the latest incarnation of it. It's for an artist called G-Flip, who's a Melbourne artist, and she has a three-piece band, including herself. She also plays drums as well, so she switches vocal mics. Back when the gig first started, they were doing a lot of instrument switching, but all that's kind of... they still switch instruments, so the drummer is also a guitarist as well and does a little bit of vocals. There's a little bit of switching around, and I'm doing front of house and monitors from the single console out the front, which has its challenges, but we've got it to a pretty fine art these days. So I'll show you what I'm working with. So working with a basic drum kit. So I got a kick. Now the kick is a trigger for this one because the front of the kick drum is actually an LED drum head. So if you Google G-Flip, or YouTube G-Flip, you'll see what I'm talking about there. So I don't have the opportunity to use a mic. I have to use a trigger, which is done via Roland TM6. So I got a kick channel, I've got snare top and bottom, hats, rack, floor. I've then got 3 cymbal mics, an overhead left, an overhead right, and a ride cymbal. Now the overheads are actually under the cymbals for this one. And then I've got the TM6, which is a stereo channel. I've then got my bass channel, so there's one bass guitar on stage. I've then got my guitar channels, so there's again one guitar, and I'll tell you why I've got 2 channels for it a bit later. I've then got a Nord keyboard. If I then go to my second bank, I've got all of my Ableton stuff. So we've got a percussion track, a sub track, a synth track, an effects track, a BVs track. Then I've got both of her vocal mics, so her main wireless vocal and then a drum vocal, the vocal 3, and then a guest channel for anybody that decides to jump up at any time. My third bank is all of my IEM channels. So these are channels that I've copied in order to send to the in-ears, so I can send some things without processing attached. So there's a bass copy, a guitar copy, keyboard copy, her vocal copies, a tech talk for the people on stage to be able to talk to me, the click, the cue, the talk to stage, all that kind of IEM related stuff. And then my last bank, or my last bank on this layer, so if I'm working down, this is number 4, is essentially my show bank. And this is something that I always do on every console that I get onto, whether it's a Digico or an Avid or a Yamaha or a D-Live or whatever it is. I always have a show bank, which is essentially somewhere that I can live for the duration of the show, and I have everything that I kind of need to get to in a really in a quick way if anything happens. So these are all my groups. So a drums, a parallel group, a bass group, a percussion group, instruments, synths, vocal, and then an effects control group, which is just controlling some of those effects sends and returns. I've then got my 3 vocal mics and my master fader. So that's my first layer. If I then go to my second layer of the console, I've got all my effects related stuff, so sends and returns. I then got all my groups in one bank as well. I've got all of my sends in one group, in one bank, sorry. So that's all of my monitor sends and effects sends. And I've got a system page, which gives me my PA outputs, my master, pink noise, support. So if my support console has to run through this board, I usually bring that in via AES and then pump it out, and then BGM, so background music channel. And that's how I generally lay out my board. I try and get all my inputs and things on the first layer with a show bank, and then sort of, auxiliary things that I don't necessarily need to reach for in the middle of a show on my second layer, but still need access to, so it's on the surface. And the other thing I'm doing with my layouts is I'm using some multi-channels, which are really cool. So there's a few things that these do for me. It allows me to conserve some buses for other things, because if you look at my session structure, I have 0 remaining buses on here. So I'm running 5 mono, 3 stereo auxes, 1 mono group, and 7 stereo groups, including the master. So everything's pretty maxed out. I've got 8 spare channel processing slots available to make stereo channels or add more mono channels if I wanted to. So yeah, the console's pretty jam-packed with things, and as I go along, I'll show you some ways that I've been able to sort of move around it and make the most of the resources that I have. So yeah, I'm using some multi-channels, which give me a few different things. So it allows me to conserve some space on my layers, so that I can keep essentially my entire list of channels on my first 2 banks, and then I can have my IEMs on my third, show on the fourth, as I was saying before, and then the cymbals are in this one. So once I've got a balance of those cymbals, I then have a single fader that I can use to essentially bring that group up and down. Now, I can choose to have some processing available. Now, that only is the processing for one of the channels, and I can pick which of the channels I want to see. So sometimes if I group my snare top and bottom, I'll make my snare top, EQ, compression, all that sort of stuff available, so I can adjust that on the fly. But otherwise, I'm just using that particular multi as essentially just a fader control of multiple channels. I'm doing the same thing with my bass because I've got a bass dry, which is just a DI signal. I only get the one channel and I double it for a bass drive channel, which I put some Digitube on in some songs, just a bit of overdrive to make it pop. Same with my guitars, because I've got a single guitar channel coming at me, but I've got this guitar delay channel, which is essentially, and I'll show you, I've got a button here that actually does some things. I'll push that for now. So now we're into normal guitar mode, where I've got a delayed channel doing a pseudo stereo kind of thing. So yeah, just putting those things in multis lets me have essentially my entire band on that one fader bank. I don't think I'm using any other multis, but as I was saying, I'm using all of my 7 groups, so a drums, a parallel, a bass, mono, and then, as you can see, percussion instruments, synths, vocals, and a master. So there's quite a bit going on here, and one of the ways that I've been able to sort of do multiple jobs but still maintain a high quality of both the front of house and monitor mixes, and don't get me wrong, all of this stuff takes quite a few production days to dial in, but once it's dialed in, we've been able to roll this out at shows pretty consistently without any issues, and it's been really great. So yeah, I am going to just head into my snapshots and show you that I have an absolute ton of them, 23 actually, so there's not that many, but essentially what Snapshots are doing for me is some transitions on stage. It's also doing some effects parameters changes, and yeah, it's just automating the show in a way that lets the monitor side of things and the effects side of things take care of itself, and then I'm able to really focus on doing a front of house mix and making that really awesome. So I've got an intro, so it basically just goes down the set list, and then songs like this where I've got 2 snapshots, so About You and About You Too, so that's the copy of that snapshot. That's a transition from so she's out front singing as a main vocalist, and then I transition to this second one, which turns her drum vocal on in front of house, turns her drum vocal on in her ears. I think they get a slightly different mix because she transitions from being out the front to being behind the kit. It brings in the parallel drum bus for me. So it's doing a bunch of things that automate that whole process, and the key to making this all work is really the timing of it, because it's in between 2 phrases that I've got to time that snapshot to go across and do that transition. So and then, you know, song. Again, it's a transition from the drummer being up there, and then he goes across to the guitar and she comes up to the drums. So that snapshot is essentially doing that whole transition for me. So unmuting her drum vocal into her ears, into front of house. You know, he gets a different mix because he's moving from the drums to the guitars. So going along all the songs, and then the same thing, it's just a transition, and then the last 2 copies as well is another transition. Everything has a fade time on it. Now the tricky thing about some of these is, and when I'm building snapshots, there's 2 levels of scope that you've got to keep in mind. So you've got your global scope up here. Now this essentially overwrites everything. So if you have something that's not selected as in scope or a green tick in this window, no matter what you have on a snapshot by snapshot basis, it won't do anything. You have to have things enabled in this global scope to work. So that's something that I set up before I even start programming the session. And so in this one, you can see I've got input channels, faders, mutes, sends, group outputs, faders, and mutes. The effects should be selected in here. For some reason it's not. I'm not sure why that is, but usually I have the effects selected in there, which does all the effects changes and stuff for me. And then per snapshot, you've also got a scope as well. So drop down that menu. Now I've got one of the snapshots selected. I can then go recall scope, and it shows me what's in this one snapshot. So you'll see that even though I've got faders and mutes selected as recalling in the main global scope, there are some things in here that I've got unselected, so that's not affecting things like tech talk. Things like the fader of the ride symbol is not in there because that's something that I want to be able to grab and not have a snapshot push it up when I don't want it. All sorts of things, obviously the supports, the talk to stage, the BGM, the pink noise, all that sort of stuff. And then in terms of my group outputs, it's just my drums groups that are being affected with the faders and the mutes. In some of the snapshots, that scope changes because I just want that snapshot to affect a single thing. Now, a good example of that is this BGM fade snapshot. Now, if I go into the scope of that, I've essentially got everything deselected except for my BGM fader. So everything else is out of the scope. The reason I've done this, and I'll come back to this, is I've created a macro that fires that snapshot so that at the start of the show, because my BGM fader is on my system layer, which is second layer, fourth bank down, it's kind of buried in system world, because once I've got that fader up at a volume for background music, pre-show, whatever's happening, I essentially just want to be able to get back to my input layers and deal with them for line check and pretty much stay there. And I didn't really want to put a BGM channel on my show layer because that can take the place of another channel that I might want all the time, and realistically the BGM channel I might want at the start and the end of the show. So what I did was create a macro that fires a snapshot that fades that BGM down over, I think, about 4 or 5, so maybe it's 10 seconds or something. I'll have a look in a minute for you. Now the key to this snapshot is to actually take it out of the line of snapshots, because as I go through and I hit next, it essentially repositions my position in the window. So if I go down to here and I fire that, if I hit next, I'm now down there on my list. I want it to be able to fire, or I want it to be able to fade the BGM down. But the thing about macros is that they are instantaneous functions. You can't put a fade time on a macro. So I discovered this little skip previous next button over here, and that changed my life a little bit, because what I was able to do is program this macro, and if I hit BGM fade, you won't see it because you can't see my fader, but over here on this channel, the fader is now at unity. If I hit this BGM fade button, that fader basically fades down for me. And if I now hit next, you'll notice I'm down here on my snapshots. If I hit next, it hasn't taken me back to the top of where that BGM fade snapshot is. So this skip previous to next button is really cool, because essentially you can now program a macro to do a function, but give it things like fade times and and things like that you have in the snapshot capabilities. So that was something really cool that I started doing with certain things. The other thing I have on this Streamdeck is a guitar solo button, which I'll go back to my band inputs and go to my guitars. As I was saying, I've got this pseudo guitar sort of thing going, and let's go to my guitar. So there we go. So guitar solo mode puts this pan to center and mutes this delay channel. If I go back to normal guitar mode, it unmutes both, pans them left and right, which means that I've now got like a pseudo stereo guitar thing. So when he lines up for a solo, I can just hit that button, mutes my delayed channel, and puts him right up the gut. So it basically just brings him into the center, and pew, guitar solo, off you go. So I'll what I'm doing with the Streamdeck is it's running into a switch and then switch into a Raspberry Pi, and the Raspberry Pi is running a piece of software called MacroStream SD, which is a company called Frostbox Labs, and I've put a link to their page in the description of this video, so you can check that out. It's a really, really cool piece of software, and I know there are multiple ways you can connect a Streamdeck to a Digico, but this has been the way that I've chosen to go purely because of its portability. I can throw the Raspberry Pi in the back of the board. I can bus power it from the USB port on the console, stick my Streamdeck in, and away we go. It's all good to go. And then the other reason I really like it is I can, if it goes via a switch, I can connect computers to that switch on the same as the Waves network as well. It all sort of works in one little nice ecosystem, and I can send OSC commands to those computers. So that's what I'm doing up here with my play, stop, and record. That controls Reaper, which is a really, really cool function. And to get that going, you've got to set up an extra external control, and I use a channel somewhere here called Reaper, which maybe isn't assigned to a layer, but essentially I might come back and chat about that. So I'll show you a little bit about how I'm using macro. So I already showed you that BGM fade function, which is really cool. I've then working down, I've got my talk to stage, turning it on and off in each person's ears. So if it's green, it means I'm talking to them. If it's red, it means that I'm not. I've then got a button which brings up my aux panel, so then I can get to in-ear mixes really quick. I find this is a little quicker than using macros. For some reason, I like that I can, save my macros for other things and use this panel to get through my mixes. I've then got an update current snapshot. So if I'm working on something during programming, I go, great, let's move on. I can update current and then go to next snapshot and just keep working without having to go back to this screen. Sometimes I go back to here anyway because I'm nervous that I'm going to update the wrong one, but never mind. I've then got a view effects, which brings up all my effects stuff, which is super cool. And then I've got save, and then, which is pretty self-explanatory, brings up the save window. I don't usually sit my Streamdeck here, but I've just got it here because I can get it in the camera view, because I do have other functions on my other macro keys as well. So that kind of renders them a bit useless in this scenario, but I usually have the Streamdeck just next to me or in front of the console. My second layer, I've just got a virtual sound check button, so this just reroutes. It's essentially selecting the copy audio function on the audio I/O. So if I go up there, audio I/O, listen to copied audio is turned on, listen to copied audio is turned off, so I can switch between virtual sound check real easily. So the way I build these macros, macro editor in here, set up macro editor. And I used to do toggle macros quite a bit, but recently I've started, and doing this on the actual macro faders of the board as well, I've started stacking two macros on top of each other on an on and an off function, which gives me the ability to change, in the case of the Streamdeck, change the color of them. And in the case of the macro buttons, actually, I'll just move this over here for a minute, but give me visual feedback on the LED so that things light up. So this one here is actually a delay throw. If I go back to my main vocal, I don't think on this snapshot delay is in, but if I go to, which one is it? This one. So delay is, I don't know if you can see that, but delay is wound in, but it's off. I can then catch certain words and phrases to just delay that word or phrase by hitting this macro, timing it. I can turn it on and off. And if you look here, I've got an on state and an off state in the macros. So this gives me that visual feedback of, yep, the delay is on, and then the delay is off. Usually my finger's over anyway, so you don't see it. But if I then go into the editor, you can see that it's input channel 20, delay send on, and the action is on. And then if I go into this editor, It's exactly the same thing, but off, and the action is off. So that's what makes the button turn, or the LED ring turn on and off, like that. And it's the same situation for the colors as well on here. So if I go up to my talk to stage, I'm on OSC 9. So the way that the Streamdeck works is this is OSC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, etc. And then the next bank starts at whatever it is, 16 or something. And I just assign them an OSC out from 1 to 16, or whatever it is that I get. And I can then turn the microphone on that channel send on with the action on, and then I can color it here by using a slash and then 2 characters which choose the colors, and that's what gives me my green and red, so I can turn on and off, and I can see visually that, yep, if I talk into my talk to stage mic now, I'm talking to everyone, or I'm just talking to him, or I'm just talking to him or her or those two. I can really choose who I want to talk to, which is really cool. And yeah, so what else have I got going on here? Yeah, so the cool thing about recoil scope is that I can change it per snapshot. So if I go into here, I can change it per snapshot. If I want to edit multiple snapshots, so let's just say I'm halfway through programming, and I go, okay, now for all of my snapshots I want to include something. Hit edit range, select all, and now this recoil scope or the crossfades or anything that I do now that I've got everything selected, or I can deselect certain things if I just want all but one. I can deselect things and put crossfades. I can change the recoil scope, all that sort of thing, which is really cool. So the other thing I've done too is, because I'm doing monitors from front of house, I have created a line check snapshot. So what this does is sends every channel at it's around neg6 or neg5 or something to everybody, so that as I'm going through the line check, I can actually see, or they can, sorry, I'll say that again. They can hear when things are going, and they're not just relying on me. So it also means that whoever is doing the line check can hear what they're checking, and they can hear if there's any issues, and then we can chat about it. So that's what that Tech Talk mic is for as well. So I usually have in-ears in, and we can talk about the things that we're checking. So what else did I have on my little list of things to talk to you about? Yeah, so I thought I'll just show you some other cool things that you can do on the Streamdeck and macros in general. But one little trick that I've really liked, and I've removed it from my board for now, is the set spill function in the Digicos. And it's similar. A lot of other companies do like DCA spill and some other things, but the set spill is what Digico call them. So you go where is it? Layout, set spill. I was in the right spot. So we can essentially, here we can build a spill from a variety of channels or anything like that. So let's just say that I want to spill across my board all the things that have to do with drums. So kick, snare, tops, whatever. I'll just select a bunch of things. Let's just say these are all part of the drums for now. Now I can assign them to a macro pretty easily. So I can just assign that to number 5, and then number 5 becomes that spill. So I'm now in that spill set of random things. Now to add that to my Streamdeck, I've then got to do a second kind of programming stage. So if I go into set up macros and find that one, which will be the last one, I can edit it. Now from here, now that the set spill is in the macro window, I can head in and edit it, which means I can send it to an OSC port. Let's just send it to 2 for now, so you can see the Streamdeck. There we go. So there's my spill set, which has just appeared there. I can then name it. So drums. If I then put a comma, it does a space. So it a line break, sorry. And I can slash R for red. That should update. And now I've got a drums spill. So if I hit that, I'm then in my spill set for drums. And then if I hit it again, I'm out of my spill set back into my regular faders. So that's sort of like a two-step process to get that spill set to show up on the Streamdeck. And when you do that, it will disappear from the macro unless you copy it. So cool thing about macros too is you can essentially duplicate one and have the same macro in different locations. So I do a few duplicated macros so that if my Streamdeck, I can't be bothered setting it up or something happens to that, I still have some macro ability on my inbuilt channel, inbuilt macros on the board. I'm just trying to remember anything else that I maybe went over in that last Instagram live. I'm just trying to copy it all pretty much so that we have some kind of recorded reference to go back to. I suppose another thing I can chat about is the reason I use groups is essentially so I can mute up from front of house but still have the input channels and things going to the ears. So I used to use control groups, but then it was the whole going back to my system page, muting the PA, opening control groups, because I still wanted to be able to hear the master so that when I was line checking, I could hear everything with that processing attached. So yeah, using groups has really changed the way that I work on this file. This file's it's had several different versions of it for years, so it's probably time to update it and do some new things to it. But yeah, anything else in snapshot land? I've locked the line check snapshot, so I can't ever override it, edit it. It's always the same thing, so it's every channel at -6. And then if I go to my intro, see how it skips that BGM fade. So I'm now in my intro snapshot. I can hit BGM fade, BGM's fading out. I'm still on my intro snapshot, and I can go next to my About You snapshot. Oh, excuse me. So yeah, that's a little bit of my workflow with this particular file. I was planning on doing some more virtual soundcheck stuff in this session, so you could actually hear some things that I'm doing. But funnily enough, some of my gear actually went out on hire this week, which is kind of exciting considering the current circumstances. So all of my Wave stuff and my DigiGrid stuff that allows me to do all that isn't in my possession at the moment, which is it's terrible for this, but really good because some of my gear is actually getting out at this weird time. So yeah, I can't see anything in the chat at the moment, so I was going to answer some questions. So if you do have any questions, feel free to bang them in the chat. I don't know about you guys, but I've been learning a lot in this time. Been doing heaps of online tutorials and just going through show files and really trying to make the most of this time off in this really weird kind of part of life, and yeah, just taking the opportunity to learn as much as I can. And I really hope that as I do more of these sessions, you guys learn some things and maybe take some workflow ideas to start developing your own things and ways of using snapshots. I use snapshots pretty religiously for all of my sessions, even if it's just controlling effects parameters. I often do that where if I'm walking into a board, the first thing I'll do is take everything out of the scope but just put effects in it, and that way I can quickly save snapshots of effects and do things that way. It's just trying to take the load off having to remember to do all sorts of things, really, is the way that I approach it. If there's anything that you want me to cover in, and I might actually just go back to my camera. If there's anything you want me to cover in future YouTube lives, let me know. I'm happy to pretty much do anything at this point, and even if I don't know how to do it, I'll definitely find out and try and show you guys a way of doing it. Please like and subscribe to Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all of that. If you just subscribe to my YouTube page, you'll get notifications about more of these I'm doing. The next session I'm going to do is looking at how I make tracks and live band work and some solutions to that, only using the inbuilt functions on the Digico. And the reason I do a lot of stuff inbuilt is because often I don't have the baggage to be able to fly a wave server and all that sort of thing. So I've gotten used to really using the onboard processing to its maximum capacity, and yeah, so I'll look at some of the things I'm doing to make tracks and live band and a vocal sit on top of that even in the next video, which will be next Monday at 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So like and subscribe, all my socials, all that sort of thing, and you'll see more of this. And yeah, comment below, let me know what you want to see out of these videos, and I'll try and do as much as I can. So thanks to anyone who was watching. Comment, like, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll see you next Monday at 11 a.m. Thanks, guys.